The late afternoon sun hung low over Chicago's bustling streets, casting long shadows across the cracked sidewalks of South Wabash Avenue. A chilly November breeze tugged at the collar of Samuel Sam Carter's faded army jacket, its olive drab worn thin from years of use. At 68, Sam moved with a deliberate limp, the legacy of a shrapnel wound from Vietnam that still ached in cold weather. His silver hair was cropped short, military style, and pinned to his chest were 3 medals, a Purple Heart, a Bronze Star, and a Vietnam Service Medal, their polished surfaces glinting faintly in the dying light. Sam wasn't one to flaunt his past, but today was different. He'd just left the VA hospital, where he'd spent the morning volunteering, reading letters to bedridden vets who had no one else. The medals were for them, a quiet reminder of shared sacrifice. Sam's weathered face softened as he spotted a young woman struggling with a stroller near a busy crosswalk. Her toddler was fussing, and a grocery bag had slipped from her grasp, spilling apples onto the pavement. Without a second thought, Sam shuffled over, wincing as his knee protested. "Hold on, ma'am. I got this," he said, his voice gravelly but warm. He knelt slowly, gathering the scattered fruit, ignoring the sharp twinge in his leg. The woman, harried and grateful, flashed a tired smile. "You're a lifesaver, sir." "Thank you." Sam waved it off, handing her the bag. "Just glad to help." As he stood, he noticed a few passers-by nodding approvingly, their eyes lingering on his medals. For a moment, Sam felt a flicker of pride, a rare warmth in a world that often overlooked men like him. That warmth didn't last. A yellow taxi screeched to a stop at the curb, its horn blaring impatiently. The driver, a wiry man in his 30s with a slicked-back ponytail, leaned out the window. "Hey, old man, you gonna stand there all day? Some of us got places to be." His voice dripped with mockery, loud enough to turn heads. Sam stepped back, raising a hand in apology. "Sorry, just helping out," he muttered, moving toward the cab to hail it. He needed to get to the community center across town, where he was due to meet a group of younger vets for a mentorship session. The driver, whose name tag read Vince, sized Sam up with a sneer. "Helping out, huh? What's with the costume, Grandpa? Those medals look like they came from a pawn shop." The words hit Sam like a slap. His jaw tightened, but he kept his composure, years of discipline holding his temper in check. "They're real, son," he said quietly, sliding into the back seat. The cab smelled of stale cigarettes and cheap air freshener, and Vince's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror, glinting with amusement. "Sure they are," he scoffed, pulling into traffic with a jerk that pressed Sam against the seat. "Bet you got those for shining boots back in the day. You don't look like no hero to me," he chuckled, shaking his head. "Man, people will wear anything for attention these days." Sam's hands clenched in his lap, the leather of his gloves creaking. He stared out the window, watching the city blur past, neon signs, honking cars, pedestrians bundled against the cold. Each taunt felt like a blade twisting in an old wound. He'd faced worse than this kid's cheap shots. Jungle ambushes, screaming mortars, the loss of brothers in arms, but somehow this stung deeper. Here, in his own country, his service was a punchline. He thought of the vets at the hospital, men and women who'd given everything only to be forgotten or mocked. Was this what they fought for? Sam's chest tightened, doubt creeping in. Maybe he was just an old fool, clinging to a past no one cared about. Vince wasn't done. As they stopped at a red light, he turned in his seat, smirking. "So what's the story, Pops? You play dress-up to scam free rides or what?" A couple in a nearby car glanced over, drawn by Vince's loud voice, and Sam felt their eyes on him, judging. He wanted to snap back, to tell this punk about the nights spent under fire, the friends he'd carried to safety, the scars he still bore. But the words caught in his throat. What was the point? Guys like Vince didn't listen. Instead, Sam forced a tight smile. "Just take me to the community center on Halstead, please." The light turned green and Vince gunned the engine, weaving through traffic with reckless swerves. Community center? Figures. Probably a bunch of old-timers swapping war stories nobody believes. He laughed again, a harsh bark that grated on Sam's nerves. The cab's radio crackled, playing a talk show about rising crime rates, but Sam barely heard it. His mind was racing, torn between anger and shame. He'd spent decades burying the pain of war, building a quiet life of service, volunteering, mentoring, helping strangers like that young mother. And yet here he was, reduced to a joke by a man half his age who'd never known sacrifice. A new obstacle emerged as they hit a snarl of traffic near a construction zone. Horns blared, and Vince slammed on the brakes, muttering under his breath. "Great, just great. Stuck with Mr. Medal of Valor here." He glanced back at Sam, his sneer returning. "Bet you're loving this, huh? More time to show off your shiny pins." Sam's patience frayed, but he held his tongue, focusing on the community center. Those young vets needed him. Guys fresh from Iraq and Afghanistan, struggling with PTSD and a world that didn't understand. He couldn't let this loudmouth derail him. Still, The mockery gnawed at him, each word a reminder of the disrespect he'd faced too often. The VA's endless delays, the job rejections, the strangers who saw only an old man, not a soldier. As the cab inched forward, Sam's eyes fell to his medals, their weight heavy against his chest. He touched the bronze star, remembering the day he'd earned it, dragging a wounded squadmate through a rice paddy under enemy fire. That memory clashed with the present, a bitter contrast that fueled his resolve. He wasn't just fighting for himself anymore. Every veteran deserved better than this. Sam straightened in his seat, his jaw set. Whatever this ride held, he'd face it with the same grit that had carried him through war. The traffic light ahead flickered, and Vince's taunts grew louder, his voice a relentless jab. Sam's heart pounded, not with fear but with a quiet, stubborn fire. This wasn't just a cab ride, it was a battle, one he hadn't chosen but wouldn't lose. We've only just begun this story, but trust me, it's about to get even more intense. Stay with us to find out what happens when Sam faces even greater injustice. The Chicago traffic crawled like a wounded beast, horns blaring in a chaotic symphony that matched the storm brewing inside Samuel Sam Carter. The yellow taxi's vinyl seat stuck to his faded army jacket, the air thick with the stench of stale cigarettes and Vince's cheap cologne. Sam's fingers traced the edge of his purple heart medal, its cool metal grounding him as Vince, the sneering taxi driver, kept up his relentless taunts. "So, war hero, you gonna tell me how you saved the world or what?" Vince's voice cut through the radio's static, his eyes glinting with mockery in the rearview mirror. "Bet you were just a cook or something, right? Polishing those medals for the parade?" Sam's jaw clenched, his weathered face a mask of restraint. At 68, he'd faced worse than this punk. Enemy snipers, jungle heat, the screams of fallen friends, but Vince's words carved into a deeper wound. Each jab was a reminder of the world's indifference to men like him. Veterans who'd given everything only to be dismissed as relics. He wanted to fire back, to tell Vince about the nights he'd spent pinned down in Vietnam, the shrapnel that still lived in his knee, the brothers he'd buried. But Sam swallowed the urge, his voice low and steady. "Just keep driving, son. Halstead Community Center. That's all I need." Vince snorted, swerving around a delivery truck with a reckless jerk that sent Sam's shoulder into the door. "Oh, I'll get you there, Grandpa. Gotta drop you off with your fan club, right? Bunch of old guys playing hero." The cab lurched through the construction zone, orange cones and jackhammers adding to the chaos. Outside, the city pulsed. Street vendors hawking hot dogs, commuters dodging puddles, skyscrapers looming like silent judges. Sam's gaze drifted to a faded billboard for a veterans charity, its edges peeling, much like the respect he'd once expected from people like Vince. The tension spiked when Vince's phone buzzed on the dashboard. He snatched it up, glancing at the screen with a smirk. "Yo, check this out," he said, holding the phone so Sam could see. It was a social media post, a blurry photo of an older man in a military jacket, medals pinned to his chest, with a caption, "Another wannabe hero begging for free stuff." "Get a job, geezer." Sam's stomach twisted. The man wasn't him, but it could have been. The post had dozens of likes, comments piling on, fake vets everywhere, probably stole those medals. Vince laughed, scrolling through the thread. "See? Nobody buys this hero crap anymore. You're just a meme, old man." Sam's hands balled into fists, the leather of his gloves creaking. The humiliation burned, not just for himself but for every vet who'd faced this kind of scorn. He thought of the young soldiers at the community center, kids barely out of their 20s, haunted by wars in deserts far from home. They didn't need this garbage piling onto their struggles. Sam's heart pounded, a mix of anger and resolve. He wasn't just fighting for himself now, he was carrying their weight too. But doubt gnawed at him. Was he too old to make a difference? Was his fight even worth it in a world that laughed at his sacrifice? The cab hit a pothole, jolting Sam back to the moment. Vince was still yammering, his voice a grating drone. "Hey, check this out, Pops. Your medals don't mean you're above the law." He leaned forward, pointing at Sam's chest. "Those shiny pins ain't gonna get you out of paying the fare, you know." The meter was ticking up, each beep a reminder of Sam's dwindling pension check. He'd budgeted carefully for this trip, knowing the mentorship session at the community center was worth every penny. But Vince's words stung worse than the cost. Sam's mind flashed to the VA hospital, where he'd spent the morning reading to bedridden vets, their eyes lighting up at his stories. That was worth more than this kid's cheap shots. Then a new problem reared its head. As they neared an intersection, blue and red lights flashed in the distance. A police cruiser pulled up alongside the cab, its officer scanning the traffic with a cold, appraising stare. Vince stiffened, his bravado faltering. "Cops," he muttered, slowing the cab. Sam noticed the sudden shift, the way Vince's hands tightened on the wheel. The officer's gaze lingered on the taxi, then flicked to Sam in the back seat. For a moment, Sam's breath caught. He'd had run-ins with police before, routine stops that turned sour when they saw his age, his jacket, his medals, and assumed he was some drifter or troublemaker. Once, an overzealous cop had even accused him of stolen valor, demanding proof his medals were earned. The memory stung, fueling Sam's growing anger. The cruiser didn't stop, but the moment added weight to the air. Vince's taunts grew sharper, as if the police presence emboldened him. "Bet they'd love to hear your war stories too," he said, nodding toward the retreating cruiser. "Probably think you're some con artist." Sam's patience was fraying, his chest tight with the effort to stay calm. He focused on the community center, picturing the young vets waiting for him. Men and women who needed his guidance, his strength. He couldn't let this loudmouth derail his purpose. But the insults kept coming, each one a fresh cut. Vince leaned on the horn, cursing at a slow pedestrian, then turned back to Sam. "What's it like, huh? Knowing nobody cares about your little pins?" Sam's eyes narrowed, his voice low but firm. "You don't know what you're talking about, kid." The words carried a quiet menace, born of years of resilience. He wasn't just an old man in a cab, he was a soldier, a mentor, a survivor. The city outside blurred past, a gritty backdrop to the battle unfolding inside the taxi. Sam's medals gleamed faintly, a silent testament to his past. But it was his resolve that burned brighter now. Whatever lay ahead, he'd face it head-on like he always had. "We're on the edge of something big. What happens next will turn everything upside down. You can't miss the climax of this story." The Chicago skyline loomed through the taxi's grimy windows, its steel and glass towers indifferent to the battle raging inside the yellow cab. Samuel "Sam" Carter sat rigid in the back seat, his weathered hands gripping the edge of the vinyl cushion as Vince's taunts filled the air like shrapnel. The driver's voice, sharp and mocking, hadn't let up. "Come on, old man, give me one good war story. Or are those medals just for show?" Vince's sneer reflected in the rearview mirror, his eyes gleaming with cruel amusement. Sam's medals, Purple Heart, Bronze Star, Vietnam Service, clinked softly against his faded army jacket, their weight a quiet anchor amidst the storm. At 68, Sam had endured worse than this punk's insults, but each word fueled a fire in his chest, a mix of righteous anger and bone-deep exhaustion. The cab was still snarled in traffic. The Halstead Community Center just a few blocks away, but feeling like a distant goal. Horns blared outside, and the radio crackled with a news report about a local veterans' protest against VA funding cuts. Sam's mind flickered to the young vets waiting for him at the center. Soldiers grappling with scars both visible and hidden. He'd promised to share his experience, to help them navigate a world that too often spat in their faces. But Vince's relentless jabs made that mission feel heavier. "You know, Pops," Vince said, swerving to dodge a cyclist, "nobody respects a guy playing dress-up. Those medals, they're just junk to most folks." Sam's jaw tightened, his knee throbbing from the old shrapnel wound as the cab jolted. He wanted to shut Vince up, to make him understand, but years of discipline held his tongue. Not yet. The tension snapped like a taut wire when the cab pulled up to a red light near a busy intersection. A crowd had gathered on the sidewalk, phones raised, filming something Sam couldn't see. Vince's phone buzzed again and he glanced at it, chuckling. "Oh man, this is gold." Another hero getting called out online. He tilted the screen towards Sam, showing a new social media post, a video of an elderly veteran being heckled at a bus stop, captioned, "Fake soldier alert! Stop scamming us!" The comments were vicious, piling on with accusations of stolen valor. Sam's blood boiled. He thought of his brothers in arms, men and women who'd faced death only to come home to this, a world that turned their sacrifice into a punchline. His voice, low and steady, cut through the cab. "You think that's funny? Mocking people who served?" Vince shrugged, tossing his phone onto the dashboard. "Hey, it's the internet, Grandpa. Truth hurts." But before Sam could respond, a sharp rap on the driver's window made Vince flinch. A tall man in a crisp military uniform stood outside, his face stern under a cap adorned with silver stars. The insignia on his shoulder marked him as a high-ranking officer, a general no less. The crowd's murmur grew louder, phones now trained on the cab. Vince rolled down the window, his bravado crumbling. "What's the problem, officer?" he stammered, clearly mistaking the general for law enforcement. The general's voice was calm but carried an edge of authority that silenced the street. "Step out of the vehicle, son." Vince hesitated, glancing at Sam as if he might find an ally. Sam just stared back, his face unreadable but his eyes burning with quiet resolve. The general leaned closer, his gaze locking onto Vince. "I heard every word you said to this man. You think it's a game to mock a veteran's service?" The crowd pressed in, their phones capturing every moment. Sam's heart pounded, not with fear but with a strange mix of vindication and disbelief. He hadn't expected this, not here, not now. Vince stumbled out of the cab, his ponytail bobbing nervously. I didn't mean nothing by it, sir. Just joking around." The general didn't budge. his presence commanding the intersection like a battlefield. "You don't joke about a man's sacrifice," he said, his voice low but carrying to the onlookers. He turned to Sam, still seated in the cab, and offered a crisp nod. "Sergeant Carter, I presume?" Sam froze, stunned. How did this man know his name? His rank? Before he could ask, the general continued, addressing the crowd. "This man served our country with honor. Those medals? Earned in blood and sweat. And you?" He pointed at Vince. "You're done disrespecting him." The crowd erupted in murmurs, some clapping, others filming with renewed fervor. A young woman in the group, wearing a community center volunteer badge, pushed forward. "I know Sam," she called out. "He's been mentoring vets at Halstead for years. He's the real deal." Her words sparked a ripple of support, voices rising in Sam's defense. A man in a leather jacket shouted, "Yeah, show some respect." Sam's chest tightened, not with pain but with a warmth he hadn't felt in years. These strangers, this community, they saw him. They cared. Vince's face flushed red, his hands raised in surrender. All right, I get it. I'm sorry, okay?" But the general wasn't finished. He gestured to a nearby tow truck, its driver already hooking up the cab's front end. "This vehicle's being impounded for a safety check," the general said, his tone final. "You can explain yourself to the city." Vince's jaw dropped, his protests drowned out by the crowd's cheers. Sam watched, his emotions a tangled knot. Relief, pride, and a lingering ache for all the vets who'd never see this kind of justice. As the tow truck pulled the cab away, the general opened the back door for Sam. "Come on, Sergeant. I'll get you to the community center." Sam stepped out, his limp more pronounced but his head held high. The crowd parted, some offering nods, others clapping him on the shoulder. The young woman from the center approached, her eyes bright. "Sam, we've got your back. Always." She held up her phone, showing a live stream of the scene already trending with hashtags like #RespectVeterans. The internet, so quick to tear down, was now lifting him up. Sam glanced at Vince, now arguing futilely with the tow truck driver. For a moment their eyes met, and Sam saw something new in Vince's expression. Shame, maybe even regret. Sam didn't gloat. He'd won battles before, but this victory wasn't about crushing an enemy. It was about standing tall, for himself and every veteran who'd been spit on by a world that forgot. As he followed the general toward a waiting car, Sam touched his medals, their weight lighter now. He'd made it through the fire, and the fight wasn't over, but for the first time in a long time, he felt seen.